I know that density sometimes can be a really hard concept because you can't really see what's going on inside all these liquids and why some are heavier than others. But we're going to explain it and we're going to make it really easy for you by making what we're going to call a rainbow in a jar. So going over some of the materials you're going to need for this, these again are just things that we found around the house. And so that's what we're trying to do with World of Science experiments that you can do with household products. So the first thing you'll need some honey. I poured these all into individual jars just to make it easier to show the experiment to you. You'll need some water, some dish soap. I chose blue, and you'll see why I chose blue in a second, but you can use any color that you want to. I've got some vegetable oil, and then I've got some rubbing alcohol. This is a little bit difficult to find right now. I'll admit I couldn't find it in the store. This is what I had left in my house. So if you can't find it, no big deal. You can just leave this one off. I also have some food coloring. I've got all of the primary colors of food coloring, and we're gonna mix some of these together to make some different colors. And then I also grabbed a few objects that you'll see while we'll use these in the end. I have a cherry tomato. I have a nail, or you can use a bolt or a screw or anything. And I also have a plastic cap from a water bottle. So we're gonna use these at the very end. So I'm gonna put these to the side. But before we start, I wanna talk about what's inside all of these liquids. And they all are full of molecules. And when you think about it, so I've made a little illustration. I'm gonna hold it up to here. Which one of these is more dense? Which one of these has more stuff in it? And that's what question we're gonna ask over and over again as we start to make our rainbow in the jar. But looking at this, which one has more stuff in it? And you would say this one. This one is more dense than this one. And that's exactly right, because it's made up of more molecules than this one. So it's gonna be more dense than the one that doesn't have a lot of molecules. So keep that in mind, keep that image in mind. Of course, we can't see the molecules in this, but you'll be able to see which one is more dense than the other one. So we're gonna start off with our honey, and I'm actually gonna build it up in this glass. I know we called this rainbow in a jar. I didn't really have a jar that would work, so we're gonna call this rainbow in a cup. So I have my honey. It's nice and thick, and it's at the bottom. So I wanna make this a color because we are making a rainbow. So I'm gonna start with some blue food coloring, and I'm just gonna add 1 drop of blue food coloring. Actually, I'm gonna back this up so you can see this. And then I'm gonna add 1 drop of red food coloring. So what do we get when we mix red and blue? We're gonna get purple, and that's gonna be the bottom of our rainbow. So I'm gonna mix this up just a little bit. I'm using a straw. You can use anything that you want to. And it takes a little bit of time for this to mix in the honey because it is so thick, it is so dense. It's got all of those molecules packed in there. And so we're gonna mix this up. Again, it only takes a little bit of food coloring. If you add too much, you're gonna get something that's closer to black. So this is now a nice color purple that I want. And look at that, that is some thick honey. All right, so I'm gonna put this straw to the side. So we've got our purple honey here at the bottom. Next, we are gonna take our dish soap. And this dish soap is a light blue, but I want this to be a little bit of a darker blue. And so I'm gonna add 1 drop of blue food coloring to this. And I'm gonna use the other side of my honey straw because I don't wanna waste too many materials here. So we're gonna mix this in, and it's gonna become a little bit of a darker blue color. There we go. And we are gonna take this and we are gonna pour this very carefully to try not to disturb the honey. We're gonna pour this on top of our honey. And I'm gonna tilt this glass just a little bit so we don't disturb it too much. And voila! Because the dish soap is less dense than the honey, it's floating on top, and you have 2 very distinct layers. My purple's kind of dark, but you can see that the dish soap is not mixing with the honey. So next, we want to add another material that is less dense than the dish soap. I'm going to push the dish soap and the honey to the side because we've already used those. So we're going to start with some water. And I've got just a little bit of water right here, but of course we're making a rainbow, so I want this to be a fun color. And we're gonna add just a drop of green to this one. And take another straw, and we're gonna mix it all up. Doesn't take much because it's water. And we are gonna add this to our layer. And once again, you want to be really careful. If you have a turkey baster or some kind of syringe, that makes it easier. I don't have one, so I'm just going to pour really, really carefully. And I'm going to tilt this to the side just a little bit as our water goes in. And initially you might see some mixing, but they will separate once it's sitting still. So I did have a little bit of mixing on that side where I poured it in, but you can see once again, we have another layer on top of that because water is less dense than dish soap. Next, we want to add vegetable oil. And you're thinking, Molly, oil seems like it would be more dense. It seems like it's heavier. It seems like it's thicker than water. But we're going to go back to the idea of our molecules in here. What's happening with oil versus water is that oil, the molecules are bigger than the water molecules, so they can't pack as tight as the water molecules can, so it is less dense. You can't fit as many in a small amount of space. Oh, I already poured the oil. So next, I want this to be yellow. So I'm gonna take my yellow food coloring and I'm gonna put a couple drops in there, or just one. Doesn't take much. Well, we'll do two. And I'm gonna take my stirrer, my straw, my fancy stirrer, and we're gonna mix that up just a little bit. Now, oil doesn't really like food coloring, but I just want enough of the color. And oil is yellow in itself, so you really don't need that much. So we're gonna take that, and be careful pouring this one because it will make a little bit of a bubbling if you pour it too fast. We're gonna pour this nice and slow. All right, so there we go. We have our next layer. And that one, now everything is nice and separated. And you can see this even better if you shine a light through it or you shine a light through the bottom of it. It'll highlight those different layers, but we have all those different layers right now. And I wanna add our very last one, and that's going to be some rubbing alcohol. Now this one, it smells bad. You don't want to get it in your eyes. So definitely be really careful with this one, parents. You're going to want to help out with this entire experiment, but especially with the rubbing alcohol part. So I'm going to add red food coloring because we want to complete our rainbow. And just one drop is going to do. Wow, this stuff really stinks. And we're going to swirl this around a little bit. I'm going to take my mixer and we're going to mix this up. Just one little swoop there. And this is the one that you want to be the most careful pouring because this will try to mix down into the oil and get some food coloring into the water. Eventually they will separate, but you want to pour this one really, really carefully. And this is the one that is the best to use a turkey baster or some kind of syringe to put it in. But again, I don't have that. Maybe you don't have that at home. We're using what we have in this whole ordeal. So here we go. We're going to pour this in. Very, very carefully. Whoop. You can see how some of that tried to get into my bottom layer. But it is separating. Woo, a little too fast there. All right. So now we have our complete rainbow in a jar. And that's really cool because obviously alcohol, the rubbing alcohol is the least dense. And so it's floating on top. And you can see all those different layers and it makes that really nice, cool rainbow. We're gonna take this a step further and we're gonna see which objects will float or sink on each layer. So once again, this is a density thing. Which one of these objects is the most dense and which one is the least dense? So as with every experiment, make your predictions where this is going to land, and we're going to start with a teeny tiny little wire nail. You can use a bolt, you can use a screw, you can use anything that you want, and we're going to drop this in and see where it goes. So that one, if you can see, made its way all the way down into the honey. So it is a dense object and it is living in the honey right now. We're going to take our cap, and where do you think this one's going to land? It is not dense at all, so it is on the top with the rubbing alcohol in our red layer. And how about our cherry tomato? We're going to drop this in. You can see that one didn't quite make its way all the way down to the honey. It's actually living on the dish soap layer. So it's not quite as dense as the honey. And the fun part about this experiment is you can not only experiment with the different types of materials that you use, maybe you try milk, try corn syrup, try all different things and see which one is more dense than the other. And then when you get done, you can use different objects to drop into here and see which one floats, which one sinks, which one sits on the middle layer. You can have endless opportunities with this experiment, and it can go on and on and on. Now, if I were to mix this all up, it would initially try to mix, but then if you leave it sitting out for a while, it will slowly start to separate. And that's the cool thing about density, is these molecules just really don't want to mix. So there you have it. That's a rainbow in a jar / rainbow in a cup today, because I didn't have a jar that would quite show as well as this cup would. And you guys can have a lot of fun with that. I've got my producer on the in my ear. Tim, do we have any questions about our fun experiment today? Yeah, this is a super cool experiment. Tim said that's a cool experiment. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. And something else that you can do, again, you can try different materials, but if you want to use all of the same material, you can actually do this with sugar. And you take different cups of sugar, different amounts of sugar in each cup, and you mix it up and you put food coloring in it. And obviously the cup and the amount with the most sugar will sink to the bottom, while the ones with the least sugar will be at the top. And that's a sugar rainbow, but I wanted to show this with different materials because this shows this, it's a little more of a stark contrast. So there you have it, density. And this actually, I gotta bring this back to weather because I'm a meteorologist and that is my true passion, my true love is weather. We use density a lot in weather because we talk about cold air and we talk about warm air, and we're in the springtime. Warm air is less dense than cold air. You would think it would be the opposite because warm air can feel kind of muggy, it can feel kind of thick, but it's the same thing that we talked about. This would be the warm air, this would be the cold air. So the warm air rises above the cold air, and when that happens, sometimes we get thunderstorms. And talking about rainbows, obviously this isn't a real rainbow, we're calling it a rainbow, but Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez is talking about real rainbows today in World of Weather. That's going to be at 1:15, how rainbows happen, double rainbows, how we get those beautiful, beautiful colors in the sky. So make sure you join her to talk about real rainbows, and we're talking about density rainbows today. So I'm going to let you guys go. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can type them up and I will get to them as quickly as I can. And we will have all the materials for this and a little explanation online at cbs46.com. Until then, I hope you guys have a great Wednesday. It's beautiful outside, so get out and stretch your legs, maybe go for a walk, social distancing, of course, but it is beautiful outside today, so take advantage of it. And it's a little bit cooler too. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday. That's your rainbow in a jar. That's the second day of World of Science, so make sure you join us for the third day.